are you, Epic Understanding family? I am so thankful that you are here to join me. And so, right off, I just want to say if you are here to talk about language, I have a win for you. That said, our guest from SLP Uncensored had to reschedule, but we will see them another time. I still have a gem for you. I still have someone very special for you. First of all, she's blindingly gorgeous, but that's not the whole thing, right? Look at her. But I'm I'm making her blush, but I have Janika Myers here for you, all the way from Trinidad Tobago, and she is a language expert. Welcome. How are you?
Thank you. Good evening. It's evening where you are. I don't even know where.
Yes.
What time is it?
It's 7:30 where I am, and
Okay.
yes. So yes, it is most certainly evening where I am, and I'm so thankful that you were able to join me tonight because I could not think of a better person who could add volume and light to speech because you travel all over the world to
Used
oh,
to.
well,
right
well
now, right
pre-COVID,
now I'm stuck at home, but
okay, yes. Pre-COVID, you traveled all over the world to help people use their voice.
pretty much, yes. I'll say amen and agree with that one.
All right. Well, I think you should. What I want to we had a wide variety of subject matters to discuss, and they were going to speak from a therapeutic perspective. Um, but what I know that you do is you help people um, their voice be heard with translation, with translation. And so I'm kind of curious where the two professions might meld together. So go ahead, I'm listening.
Sure. So I can't speak about speech pathology. That's absolutely not my field. But what you said is
Oh,
spot on. And in preparing for this show, I just did a dictionary check, and what's quite interesting that I had never known before is that there are two definitions for linguist.
yes.
So people like myself often refer to ourselves as linguists, meaning people who speak several languages. So that's
Mm-hmm,
one definition of a linguist. But I found another definition that I
mm-hmm,
had just ignored for all of these years, which is somebody who specializes in linguistics. Now, the study
mm-hmm,
of linguistics doesn't necessarily mean that you speak several languages. You take more of an academic, theoretical interest in languages, the structure of languages,
mm-hmm.
different components of language, like the sounds, how the different sounds are formed in different languages, meaning behind certain words, and meaning across different languages, and how they might relate. And so, linguistics is the study of those different components of language. But for myself, although I call myself a linguist, I don't study linguistics. Matter of fact, anecdote here, I
Mm-hmm.
failed linguistics
Oh
twice.
my gosh.
I did two modules of linguistics back in university days,
Uh-huh.
twice, and I failed both times. But as far as language use and learning different languages, how to speak languages, how to use languages, and even for my profession, what I do is translate, which is
Mm-hmm.
translating from one language to another in written documents, and interpreting, which is
Mm-hmm.
basically transferring the meaning of one language to another language
Uh-huh.
verbally. So that's a completely different skill set. So the moral of the story is you can totally fail at linguistics, the study of linguistics, but you can be a brilliant linguist. Now, how funny is that?
That, you know what? That is very funny, and it's going to get me to one of my questions. Now, I know this isn't your field, but I want to ask you this question because I think you might come about it from a different angle. Have you ever worked with someone who maybe had, who was maybe autistic or anything of that nature?
So no, not specifically. Although your question brings to mind children with other learning difficulties. So
Mm-hmm.
again, way back when, I had the privilege of being part of a pilot project
Mm-hmm.
teaching English to French primary school students,
Uh-huh.
and so it was their literally their first introduction to a foreign language. These are children of age maybe 8, 9. I
Mm-hmm.
think the oldest ones were like 10 years old. So they were primary school students, first time they're encountering English. And I did have a class
Mm-hmm.
of special students, not specifically autistic, but they had some learning disability or the other.
I
And
see.
my mandate with them was to introduce them to this foreign language. They had trouble mastering their own language, French. But
Mm-hmm.
what I found was through the games and very recreational pedagogical approach, they were able to pick up the English. And even more, what really astonished me, as any teacher might know, seeing the children in classroom setting is one thing, but when you run
Uh-huh.
into them in the supermarket or
Yes.
at the mall, and one, they recognize you from a distance. But these children, it happened like on 2 occasions I remember,
Mm-hmm.
they greeted me in English in the mall. And I thought,
Whoa.
wow, you remembered what we were doing in class. Despite the difficulties and despite whatever their disabilities might have been,
Mm-hmm.
they were able to retain basic greetings in English. And I thought that was just fantastic. So I
I
have
think
had a little bit of experience there.
I think that's remarkable. I want to pull up this definition here. And it's based off of this movement. It is the neurodiversity movement prefers to view individuals with autism and other cognitive neurological impairments in a similar fashion, simply as people with normal human differences and behavior. And it's just kind of funny the way you explained how you taught those children, because it seems like you lean to that perspective.
So I need to reread that definition that you just put up to
Yeah.
grasp it fully. It's a
Mm-hmm.
little over my head, but what speaks to me in that definition is that people are simply people with
Mm-hmm.
normal human differences in behavior. And that's the part that resonates with me. Sometimes people may not be even diagnosed with a
Mm-hmm.
particular behavioral difference until much later on in life. Depending on where you live, depending on where you grew up, in terms of the society in which you live, these things may go unnoticed,
Mm-hmm.
simply because the level of development in certain countries just it goes unnoticed in the school system.
Mm-hmm.
There simply aren't maybe those teachers with specialties to detect these differences in behavior as it's put in that definition. So you could literally go through life without knowing yourself that you have some kind of difference. So I guess maybe to come back to my example,
Uh-huh.
and this was in the French system. So France, being part of Europe, being a fairly developed country, they are trained. Their teachers are trained to detect these differences in behavior, and that is how I knew that this particular class was a special class,
Mm-hmm.
because they had already been sort of diagnosed in the school system there. But I feel as if those children were in my country, Trinidad and Tobago, um, they might have gone undetected. They might have just gone through school being maybe labeled as slow learners,
Okay,
and without actually recognizing that they had some, particular reason for their difference in behavior.
I see. You know, what I am receiving mostly as I grow in understanding of just different segments of the community, that people want to, even though they're different, they want to be viewed as normal. This idea that someone's not normal because they're different, I think has to be done away with.
Yeah, and maybe if I come back to my core guiding beliefs, which is anchored in my spiritual beliefs, uh,
Hmm.
we are all created uniquely. We
Yes.
are fearfully and wonderfully made, and we are all a unique masterpiece by the
Hmm.
Creator. So,
Hmm.
if each one is unique, then it goes without saying that, yeah, we're all different.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, um, when you go to the different countries, and sometimes you're helping children, sometimes you're helping adults, sometimes do you ever have to help um, people who identify differently than what they were born as? Um, so someone who's transgender.
I can't say offhand. No one has
Hmm.
ever identified themselves specifically in that way to me.
Hmm.
And quite sincerely, maybe I don't pay particular attention because in those sort of disaster settings, you're there to help everyone, anyone who is in need. So unless there is, I don't know, I'd say maybe, for example, in the case of Haiti post earthquake 2010,
Hmm.
because people were trapped in buildings, trapped in the rubble, many people you could see visibly had lost their limbs. They had lost
Uh-huh.
a leg, an arm, or something. So there, of course, certain visibilities that you can see. But in terms of transgender persons and so forth, you may not necessarily know,
Uh-huh.
unless that conversation is somehow engaged. But I have not had those kind of conversations. And again, due to the nature of the organizations that I worked with, in particular the International Red Cross, part of our mandate, of course, is its neutrality.
Uh-huh.
And neutrality basically means you treat with all in the same way.
Awesome.
Now, could be man, woman, child, transgender, whatever your difference, political affiliation, religious belief, sexual preference, whatever it is, it's that does not get in the way of receiving humanitarian assistance. So, in a sense, we're sort of trained to not to be blind because there are differences that you see,
Uh-huh.
but then there are other differences that you don't see.
Okay. Fair enough. If you would, join with me and watch this short video. It's about 2 minutes long, and I just want to get your feedback and your thoughts on it. So let us pray that my my technical
It's
skills.
gonna work. It's gonna
Yes,
work.
yes, it's gonna work, right? Okay, here we go. It's doing that, and now we're playing. So, Allie, how's your voice changed since you joined the group here at Con?
So my voice is my pitch is a lot better. My resonance is a lot better. I'm more confident going out, out in public and stuff like that. I don't get misgendered when I'm on the phone, which is, I mean, it's huge because it's so hard to just go through this. Transgender speech therapy involves working with a client to change the way their voice sounds. It can involve things like changing their pitch, higher or lower, their resonance. Palomino. Palomino. Good, nice pitch. Penicillin. Penicillin. Good. Ridiculous. 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 That was better. Right now, this blue band is where we're trying to use for our target pitch. As you can see, much of my speaking is winding up just below it, so not quite where I want to be, but we're still working on it. My, mo, ma, lin. Well,
I think the voice is like the frosting on the cake. It is the final thing left for me to accomplish in order to just not think about anything and just be in the world.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Good. So let's try to sit up a little bit and take a bigger breath from your belly.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay, where did it feel comfortable?
4.
Okay. And it's gratifying to watch someone feel really good about themselves. And if we can play even a very small part in having them feel good about who they are and how they present to the world, then we did a good job.
People here are very caring, they're very accepting, there's no judgment. It really is a warm, wonderful atmosphere, and I'm just thrilled with it, and I think it's something that should be shared.
Amazing. I find that so insightful, quite honestly. And until I started taking a closer look at this, I did not realize how much voice quality and your language is so much a part of your identity. You can't say that because you're an expert. You know this already.
Well, you know what? You can know some things in a kind of latent way,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can know in a more obvious way. So, actually, in looking at the video, two
Mm-hmm.
things came to mind.
Okay.
One is that, and this is my own personal experience,
Mm-hmm.
depending on the language that I'm speaking, I have a completely different tone and pitch. And it's funny that in listening to so now I can recognize, yes, those seem to me to be transgender men who present as women,
Yes.
and people would often comment that my voice is quite low, that I have a very low tone.
Uh-huh.
And when I think back, in high school, actually, being part of the choir, I was a very natural alto. So when I'm singing, if you can't see me, you would
Uh-huh.
think I'm a man. Because my singing voice is actually, I can hit the low notes very well, but not the highs. So I can relate to that video. Um, Now, the other thing is that what is more acceptable in which society? And I
Ooh,
think
yes.
that varies. I think that varies from
Mm-hmm.
society to, from one society to the next. But it is, how should I say, thinking of speech therapy as being essential to somebody's identity
Uh-huh.
definitely is. It's coming to me now. This
Yes.
is the new concept I need to think about.
So if speech itself, linguistics itself is part of your identity, um, then your voice quality, of course, is part of your identity. When you go from culture to culture, are you perceived differently? You know? No, you haven't changed, right? I haven't changed one way or the other,
Yeah,
but because I'm in a different culture, all of a sudden I'm perceived differently.
yeah. The voice, your voice carries. So voice, what is voice? It's sound,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also it's meaning. So you could be saying something using particular words that convey a particular meaning,
Mm-hmm.
but depending on the pitch or the tone of your voice, it could actually have a different meaning
Mm-hmm.
just because of the tone or
Mm-hmm.
the intonation. You know how we often say it's not what you say, it's how you say it.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
so I think that's something that varies from one culture to the next. For example, I worked for some time in Bangladesh, where women are generally, at least in the particular area where I worked,
Mm-hmm.
very traditional town. Although in a capital city, women are a little bit more liberated, but in that particular town, women basically were seen and not heard.
Okay.
So what I found, well, interesting, first of all, one, I had certain liberties as a woman just because I'm a foreigner and because I look different
Mhm.
to
Yeah.
a woman of that town. So me with my big mouth, my loud mouth, my boisterous self, and a massive curly hair, I would be forgiven for saying certain things or for speaking out or
Mhm.
for even speaking in a room full of men. I'd be forgiven.
Mhm.
But I often noticed, and I did try to prod this question with some of my female colleagues.
Mhm.
Again, though the organization that I worked with is, prides itself on being neutral and
Mhm.
respecting all and sundry, but I often found that my Bangladeshi female colleagues were quite soft spoken and very timid in
Mm.
a room. But if I was just there with them alone, or they came over to visit me, or we were having lunch, the conversation would be totally different between us two women as opposed to them interacting with me, the same woman, same
Right.
person, same colleague, same
Uh-huh.
friend. If they were interacting with me in a public setting,
Yes.
or particularly in the work setting where there were men in the room, completely different person. So I think that has a bit to do with, of course, the societal norms,
Mhm.
traditions, and a bit to do with language as well.
Now, this might sound silly, but I almost feel as if tones themselves have changed over the years because I feel like maybe in the 30s and 20s, 30s and 40s in America, women were supposed to talk very hard. I do.
I'm glad we came down a notch.
Well,
I'm
yeah,
glad we came down a notch.
but or they talked in more of a baby kind of voice.
Yeah.
Like,
Maybe that
hi.
was part of the whole, charm of the homemaker. I don't know.
Maybe so, but I definitely think um there's a boldness that has, come about with
Mm.
American females. Um, I think our voices have gotten a bit deeper, think things of that nature. And I also think the English language has changed and developed. And you could probably speak to that more, readily than me. But just as a layperson, I noticed that.
Well, as far as language goes, language is constantly evolving.
Hmm.
If you think back to the 1990s introduction of the internet for the mass public, that came with a whole new range of vocabulary.
Okay.
The internet superhighway and everything to do with the internet, that was a completely new jargon. Now, in the context of COVID, look at how many words have come into not just the English language, but all the languages that we didn't have previously. All of this thing about confinement and quarantine and COVID and social distancing. And these are all new concepts, new words that have found their way into the vocabulary. So language is always evolving. As far as you were referencing, so the tone, I can't really speak to that too much. I mean, I guess maybe I'm just an amateur observer.
Okay.
But it would seem, maybe if I just think back at pop culture over the years, um, yeah, it seems like the tone for women has dropped and has become a little bit bolder. And I wonder, I don't know, but I wonder to what extent that might have to do with women's rights movement. That having to actually fight for your rights. You don't go out there fighting, screaming. You're screaming in bold, I would think, loud tones. In real terms. That's my imagination. I don't know. I haven't studied this, so don't quote me on
Yes, but I think I agree
it.
with you. I think sometimes we just simply have to believe our own eyes and our own ears for this matter. Now,
Yeah.
before we go, I do want to talk to you about this particular idea. Do you think that you can tell someone's race based off the sound of their voice?
Not always.
But sometimes maybe? Is it an
So
indicator?
again, let me speak for myself.
Mhm, mhm.
What I have found is that I can tell maybe a country, which country somebody's from,
Ah.
by the different accents. So, for example, in the Spanish-speaking world,
Mhm,
and this you can probably relate to in the United States, you've got a mix of Mexicans, Cubans, Puerto Ricans,
mhm.
folks from Honduras, Central America. Now, maybe to the untrained ear, it just sounds like, rah, rah, rah. It sounds like, what are they saying, right? It just sounds like Spanish, right?
Okay. Yes.
Or non-English or Spanglish.
But
Um,
English, yes, very much so.
right, a mix of Spanish and English. But for
Mhm,
me, I have um, grown in being able to detect, which country a particular accent is from, and it's not just the accent. It's part of it is the intonation, the speed,
mhm,
vocabulary. Sometimes, certain countries have specific ways of saying the very same thing.
mhm.
So I'm fairly good at doing that for the Spanish speakers and as well as the French speakers. Like I can tell the difference between uh, French speaking Haitian or somebody from France or maybe from Algeria or from Martinique or one of the other French islands. That I can tell fairly well.
Wow.
But in terms of telling gender or race, nah, I'm not that
Okay.
good.
Well, well, fair enough. How many languages do you speak, by the way?
So I'd say I master three.
Uh,
English, which is my native tongue,
uh,
French and Spanish, and those are the languages that I work in. I also speak a mix of Creoles. So I formally learned Haitian Creole because I lived in Haiti and I took classes there.
uh-huh.
But because of the length of time I lived for 3 years in Martinique and for 6 years in Guadeloupe. So I also learned the Creoles there, which are very similar. They're all French-based Creoles, so I
Uh-huh.
understand them and I speak them fairly well, and I can write a bit of it. And I did 1 year of Portuguese, but I wouldn't boast about that. I can understand. I've been to Brazil a couple of times. I can understand what people are saying. I'm a little bit more slow to respond. And right now I am trying my best with German.
Ah, good in talk.
Yes. Dankeschön. Sprechen Deutsch.
I
That's
think
as far as I go.
yes, yes. It's not very much. I still remember a little Japanese from high school.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Okay, from high school.
From high school, yes. Um,
What's that story?
well, I took Japanese in high school.
Well, that's great that you had that option.
I
How
did.
wonderful.
There's
Yeah.
a lady at church, and she'll speak to me in Japanese. Sometimes she
Hmm.
likes my accent. She says I do that well, but I don't know much and I don't remember much. I can simply say,
Arigato.
well, hajimemashite. Watashi wa Erika desu. Dozo yoroshiku.
Ooh, that sounds good. I don't know what you said. Something about your name?
Yes, I just said hi. My name is Erica, and how are you? And nice to be with you. That's
But
it.
did you notice that your tone changed? You
Mm.
you you went down to a whisper. You got
Ah,
like mellow. Yes.
you know what? Probably because that's what I was taught. That's what I was taught. How, how interesting. It's
Well,
like automatic. It's like
check
automatic.
go check the recording when you do the playback.
I will. I
So
most.
literally, your tone literally changed. You became all sort of meek and mellow,
Ah,
and yeah.
well, you know what? It is ingrained in me, and I did not even know it. I'm glad you picked up on that. So I just really cannot thank you enough for spending time with me. Is there anything that you want to leave our audience with?
Language opens doors. I know people say, some people who may not feel inclined to learn a language. And of course,
Mhm,
there's a level of difficulty with learning anything that's new.
mhm,
But in all of the different areas of knowledge that one could study, I would say language is the golden key
mm,
that opens doors that you cannot imagine. So, if you've been thinking about learning a new language, a foreign language, and you keep thinking about it and you're dreaming about it, and you might even
mhm.
have bought a book and maybe even signed up for a class, but you never went to the class, don't put it off. I really would want to encourage your viewers, just start, and you can start really easy. There are so many apps you can download on your phone now. You don't have to take like a formal class online or whatever. You can just download the app on your phone and just start with a couple words. You're gonna find people out there. I can promise you, you're gonna find people who speak that language. Once you start learning the language, the people, you're going to be like a magnet drawing those people to you. So you're going to get those opportunities to practice the language. And who knows, you may find a new friend thanks to that language.
You want to know what I learned from you? That the native tongue is like a skeleton key to the soul. Do you remember talking with me about that?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
I appreciate you for jumping on and supporting me in this journey. And maybe SLP Uncensored, maybe you can come on and join your hearts with them because you have been such a jewel. I just thank you so much.
Thank you for the invitation. Always a pleasure to chat with you, Erica. What you're doing is making an impact uh, on the world, on that 1%,
Yeah,
but that 1% has ripples across the world. So keep on doing what you're doing with love, Coach Love.
I love it. I appreciate you. Good night, family. Bye bye.
Okay, good night.
Bye bye for now.